Welcome to the podcast where we challenge the way you see food. I'm your host, Ariane Bozarth, a board-certified nutrition specialist and founder of ASO Nutrition. I'll make you question everything you thought you knew about diets and nutrition. Spoiler alert, all diets fail, and it's not your fault. Join me as we explore your body's bio-individual needs to finally put an end to the frustrating cycles of trial and error in chasing nutrition solutions. Nutrition isn't a one-size-fits-all, but you do have a biologically designed perfect fit. It's time to unlock your body's brilliance. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited today to welcome a brilliant mind, Katie Weise. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist with the state of Minnesota, and she has received her master's from St. Mary's University and a bachelor's from the University of St. Thomas. She currently practices in an outpatient clinic, the Midwest Center for Personal and Family Development in Burnsville, Minnesota, and enjoys working with individuals ages 6+, couples, parents, and families. Katie has a trauma-informed background and has completed training and certifications in post-induction therapy and is a certified clinical trauma professional levels 1 and 2. In addition to a trauma-based approach, she uses family system theories as well as training from CBT, DBT, SFBT, and play therapy and psychoeducation to support client skills in daily functioning.
Thank you
So,
for that
welcome.
lovely intro. That was really very nice. Thank
You are so welcome. I'm excited to have you here today to talk about this incredible experience that we just had.
Yes.
So,
Jump into it.
for the audience, this last weekend we did a Her Circle event, bringing back women to kind of their roots of understanding themselves, but also that tribe vision that we have lost of community.
Yeah.
And so we had this event and we did a kickoff where we were doing tuning for the chakras. And it was really taking time for all of this exploration of different healing modalities, but also how we can tune ourselves and also tune in and provide this expanded awareness of when we're out of balance.
Well, and that's interesting because so a lot of times I had to end up flipping language for myself because I really did not have much of a background in understanding chakras or some of the language that you were using. So I would flip it in my own head and say like, okay, we're doing emotion or feelings reduction right now.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, we're doing carried emotions right now. Oh, okay. Like, so
I get it. I can translate it.
I can translate it. And I think that's a good thing too to talk about. Like sometimes we might use language for something. And if we can further clarify what we're trying to get across as far as our message, we can connect a little bit better just because it just might be one word or over another, right?
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the things I think that was interesting about the whole weekend is this common thread of like tuning in. Some of it is that we have lost the language and there's so much diversity in all the different lenses that we use to turn inward, all the different tools, and most of it's turned outward.
Yes.
And so because of that, there isn't this common thing. Because what I brought up in my intro was the ancient traditions, right? In ancient traditions, they had this common language and they used the tuning and then they used it in community as well. So much more to a greater extent than we do now. But I think there wasn't this amalgam of like all these different pieces like we have to kind of navigate through. And so I think because of that, it is a little bit more of a hurdle to get back to this baseline of understanding and foundational awareness of this piece of what it means to do self-healing, because that's all healing comes from self.
Yes. And so that's interesting when you bring it. My brain immediately goes to, okay, you're talking about codependence. You're talking about needs and wants.
Yes.
Okay. You're talking about living inside the body. And for some people, the experience might have been, it wasn't safe to live inside my body. Right?
Yeah.
And so how do I know if that wasn't shown to me what an appropriate need or want was? Like, how do I actually attend to that for myself?
Yeah.
How do I tune back into something that I might have inherently known how to do, but it's been lost because of the experiences that I've had? And not only that, but if we don't have the needs and wants met, so that area of codependence met, we are never going to be able to establish boundaries.
Yeah. And I think, boundaries being a big one, but
Yeah.
I think we need to dive into this idea and explain for the audience codependence versus interdependence. And then we'll bring it back to kind of this exploration piece.
Yeah. Okay. So, and there's a third, anti-dependence.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes,
Don't forget that one.
So the anti-dependent shows up and says, you know what, I've already done it myself my entire life. I can do it myself. I'm a rock star. And a lot of times those are our heroes. They are such good caregivers, predominantly for other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Terrible for themselves.
Yes.
Wonderful. Welcome to, hi, medical profession. Raise your hand if we see you.
Right?
We see you.
All those practitioners, I'm going to help you.
And I don't want to overgeneralize. Not everybody who's going into the medical field, right? Okay. So a lot of times they're the ones that knew how to do for themselves because the grown-ups in their lives were not showing up.
Yes.
Right. And not only that, but probably the child was oftentimes parenting
themselves.
Not only themselves, but the parent.
Yeah, fair point.
Yes. Yeah, because the parent didn't know how to take care of their own needs, so they had to lean on the child to do it. It's actually would consider it to be an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like that whole generation of like latchkey kids, right?
Yeah. Yep. So then we also have the codependent who would say, I need the knight in the white horse to show up for me.
Yeah.
I can't do this for myself. I never figured out how to do this for myself. Because maybe you had a parent who hovered over and did everything for you because they wanted to protect you so much. Why? Because maybe they went through their own history of pain that they never wanted to repeat that cycle. But unfortunately, as a result of that, you never learned how to tune into yourself and figure out what it is that you needed. Mm-hmm. Because the grown-up was always trying to actually, through you, take care of themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes those two relationships might tend to partner up. You might see an anti-dependent and a codependent tend to find each other because they're trying to find an opposite balance. Right. And then what we're really ultimately looking for is that push and pull where we recognize I can figure out the things that I need to do to take care of myself and that really serve me. And it can come in so many different arenas because we have our needs. These are the functional pieces of food, clothing, water, shelter, medical needs, physical needs, sexual needs, financial needs, you name it, right? Those are the things that let us go from a day-to-day basis.
Right.
But then we also have the things that bring us joy. Those are our wants. Those are maybe the creative outlets. And by the way, they can flow back and forth, right? You can have a need and a want, like be partners. Absolutely. Absolutely. I can think for some people, like a creative outlet sometimes is that joy. But it's also that maybe it's that spirit piece of them that needs to flourish. Maybe it's that spirituality for them that needs to flourish. So that is an absolute need.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that interdependence play is saying, okay, I can tap into that and figure out what it is that I need, what it is that I want. We also want to highlight that we want to jump into the needs. Those are always going to be our primary focus before we start going into the wants. Why? Because we can suddenly overcompensate if we're going into the wants predominantly.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Right. And that's when we tend to see excessive shopping, maybe relationship jumping. So love addiction, food addiction, work addiction.
Well, and I think it also disconnects that understanding of needs, like really needing, like, do I actually need this versus the want? And we differentiate that. And I think also in today's culture, because there's so much ready access.
And you know, the hero is going to be like, I didn't really need it.
Yes.
Oh!
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it's as long as
that's a growth edge. So that's a growth edge, right?
Yeah. And it almost like they need,
It's knowing the balance between the two. And so that's where that interdependence is going to come into play, where I can figure out the things that I do need and want, but I can also ask you when I am running short.
Yes. And I think also for that hero perspective of really hard to ask for help.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And then also thinking
it's almost physically painful.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
But they're not going to get. And I think this is a thing I want to footstep, and I want to also bring this into the context because not just of the individual, but of our relationship related to the writ large healing, and not just medical professionals, but across the whole gamut of, because it changes the perspective and also puts it in like the ultimate goal is that in between, that interdependence.
Yes.
And we lost that concept too. And that's why when you raise this, I think this is like critical for the audience, because we don't think of the partnerships that we create in the healing space in that lens either.
Talk about that more. And not only, and I don't know, how does that relate back to maybe even some of the chakra work that you were talking about? Yes. Can you
So in that, like, and you were helping frame this when we had a talk before the show of, when you think of that codependency, it's that single source. Like, they are the person that is going to solve for me.
Yeah.
And how much this has been set up in, especially the medical establishment, is I am the white coat and I am going to tell you what you need.
Yes.
But when you really look at it, it's like, how could they possibly? They see you for 15 minutes or even better, like with therapy, like you get longer, you get an hour, but they're not in the interplay 24/7, 7 days a week. taking in and also like driving. That's what we looked at. Like you also are driving some of these shifts and changes in a way to provide feedback for your own healing. And because of that, when you shift to that codependence, you can see how you actually are removing some of your own inner tuning, focus on you, and you're not in that 24-hour lab because you outsourced it.
Yeah.
You outsourced it to someone else to solve for you that only sees you for 15 minutes and has a microcosm, a tiny, tiny snapshot of what it is that makes you you.
Yes. Now, there's an education piece that I think that we go to people who specialize in different areas that we absolutely need, but it should be an education process that allows the other person then to take the reins on.
You nailed it. So when you get to the interdependence, you go to that person.
Yes. You're working yourself out of the job.
Yes. Okay. So this is the thing that we had talked about before. So and both of us are on the same mindset of when you're working and partnering with someone in this space, it should be I am going to actually make my job in your space obsolete because I'm going to at this time there may be a part where it is a little codependent, right? Like I'm going to have a little higher because I'm going to, and then the practitioner may be playing more of that anti-dependent, right? Like
and I wouldn't even say when you're going in to get help, I don't think there's a codependence going on initially in that moment. I mean, maybe if we do a deeper dive and we find somebody individually, but I'm just saying you are going in and you're asking for help.
Yeah,
I
fair
would
point.
say that's
fair.
absolutely an interdependence. And then you're relying on that person for that expertise, hopefully.
But not above self.
Yeah, but then hopefully to guide you towards like what makes sense. Working then in partnership.
Agreed.
Right?
Yes.
And then you can take the reins with that. And then you can come back and then you give that feedback response, just like when we maybe talk about the bioacoustics or any kind of like living experience that we have. We get feedback on a constant basis and we check in and then we can go back to that expert and say, this is what I've received, blah, blah, blah. What's the next step forward?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it sounds like what you were describing is like in this interdependence, when you're asking for help, you're just expanding your toolkit but you're doing it from a place of self-focus, inward tuning, discernment. Because that's one of the things that comes up is if you don't look inside and if you don't have this foundational education piece and you don't build the language and all these tools, how can you then, if you don't know you, if you don't have this and you're always looking for someone else to tell you about you that can't possibly, that's that codependent, right? Then how are you going to have discernment of, because everybody has their different lens and their different perspective, which we also see in the chakras, right? There's, and sometimes it's not a fit for you. And then, so it's to say, I got a little bit, like, I got some really cool education, but like from this point on, this isn't resonating with me anymore. And I've worked with practitioners, like, I needed this in the beginning. And then as I grew and I expanded and saw different insights, I maybe can do it on my own, which is great. Or actually I found this other level that like, it just resonates with me more. Doesn't mean that practitioner or that service or that line of exploration, that toolkit is, null. It's just for me, I now have to start, this isn't doing it for me anymore.
Yes. And, that is a conversation I have with people when they first walk in my door. I say, if I am a fit for you, great. If I am not, though, a third of the work, regardless of the modality that I use, a third of it is just the relationship.
Agreed.
And you're talking about connection here, right? And here's the other thing that I think about too. And I was reading Simon Sinek's Infinite Game, and no, I realize that's not a therapy book, but I also think it's important for us to diversify. He focuses a lot of the time on the business world. One of the chapters in there that I was really struck with was talking about vulnerability and trust, right? And how do we? One, he was building it with this group of gentlemen on an oil rig, and as a result, their incident rate for accidents went down substantially because they ended up building vulnerability and trust in a population where you wouldn't have expected it.
Yeah.
Okay? But I think about that, and I think about that tuning inward to what I would identify as maybe that inner child. You might identify it as the chakras,
right?
And saying, my functional grown-up self, my functional adult will show up and take care of you no matter how you show up and whatever you're saying to me.
Yeah.
I'm going to tune into that.
Yeah.
I'm going to pay attention to you. And when you show up, and that's really vulnerable to show up, I'm going to build trust with you by responding. And whether that responding is just noticing you, again, inner child, or if it's saying, what do you need me to do to take action right now? And again, that kind of follows suit with like, if you're going to somebody and you're noticing something's helpful, something's not helpful, I'm tuning into this person, and you are paying attention, like, yeah, this is not working out for me. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. Build trust within yourself that you are
100%.
going to take care of you, and you are saying, and it's okay that that's not a right match. Just like I say, a third of the work, depends on whether or not this relationship works. And I go back to, does it work for yourself?
Yes.
Are you paying attention to the relationship with yourself?
Well,
Yeah.
and that gets back to, again, this foundation of the interdependence comes into accountability. And I think that part of what came out that we were talking about yesterday is we spend so much time looking outward, and then we attach like these gurus, right? That are out there, and like they know they're like got the great solution and they know everything. And when you really break it down, it's like they got the solution for masses.
Yeah.
But you're not a mass.
No.
You it's
you hit on something for me. Keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So it is, how could they possibly, without knowing, and like again, they're a little, and then so that whole thing, like you're an authority, like I put you on a pedestal,
No.
and that you're gonna solve for me. And here's the thing, and I want to stress this of the interdependence. If you listen to that guru with a mindset of from that place of discernment of like, I like what you're saying, and I'm actually in resonance with that, and I think this could be a tool for me. And then you do exactly what you said. Come to you and try on this tool and play with it and do it from your lens, and then see what that feedback is and build on that. That building, I'm going to leverage you. This is that whole, like, with like the confidence. I think that you could be helpful to me, and I'm going to leverage you to try this on, but I'm the one that's going to be really checking in.
Yeah.
That is beneficial. Now, if you are the guru and you're going to solve, and then also I'm not tuning in and maybe I'm not getting results, but I'm going to keep doing this because everyone's doing it. What, like, that person then is not providing that value, because the only value is ever going to be, and this is that whole thing of the tuning that we did. It's all about you. Like,
well, and not only that, but you stop letting whoever that practitioner or guru or whoever, what the label it might be, you stop letting them be a human being in that moment.
That's true. Yes.
Right? Because it turns into this better than, less than. It's a relational esteem issue. I am continuously going to be in a less than or down position to you as my teacher.
Yes.
I'm not sitting in my own humanity either in that.
Well, and I think what I was getting at from, like, if you come, it can't be, I love that. I love that you pointed out the less than, because it can't be a less than if you are seeing them as a tool or a partnership to bring you into further expansion. And when I say expansion, I'm talking like healing, balance, like all the different language for that piece. And so it's like, they can't be above you if they are, like, think of it as when you're going into, and this is maybe, I don't know about this analogy, but you're going in to buy something, right? Like a phone. I'm going to go buy a new phone. One is, maybe I know that I want to have an Apple. I'm not going to go into the Android store and think that they're going to start talking to me about that. I need to know where I'm coming from and what I want, but also like what I need first, and then also like what the outcome is, what I want to get to. I need to at least have that foundation first.
Congratulations, you just described boundaries.
Love it.
Love it.
And then, but also when I go in there, there is no one that's superseding me in the purchase of a phone because it's a tool that I'm going to use. And I think when it comes to the health space for some reason and healing, there has been this shift in like above. Like someone knows more than me and they're above, instead of seeing them as this equal player of exchange.
Yes, 100 billion%. That's the actual word. Let's just use that.
I love it. I'm going to use it all the time. 100 billion.
100 billion, right? Because what ends up happening is we lose our inherent value.
Yes.
And we are just innately born with yep. 100. That does not go up and down. That does not change.
No.
Your esteem will rise. Your esteem will fall.
But your
value always stays the same. And that's probably the biggest thing to work. For instance, when I'm working with clients, is working on that inherent worthiness. And I can't tell you how many people fight me on this and tell me, well, what about this example? What about this person? You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, yeah, I know, but we have to ultimately see that there was inherent worthiness within us all.
Yes.
And there are situations that absolutely have changed. And as a result, they have, and I'm not saying they're the worthiness, I'm just saying situations have occurred, and whether it's brain chemistry, whether it's trauma history, whatever might have happened, and has caused a maladaptive response out of that being.
Right. And this gets back into in this exploration that I loved of the chakras and tuning into each of them is this awareness of the harmonics and the power that we have when we tune in and that we can balance. And the understanding that the physical plane, the densest, and all these things that express, which also can lead into neurotransmitters and everything else, that is responding not just to the environment that's around us, but it's also responding to that emotional level and to the thinking, the mind, and our thoughts and those patterns, but in the intuition or the lack of intuition and not bringing that piece in to bring in balance. And then also the soul self. We always forget about this piece, this driver, the light behind the eye, that is, you can't discount. And so when you get into that connection with your words of inherent value, and when you explore those pieces of you and the you that's behind and how powerful you can be to shift things, and then all of a sudden, lo and behold, the physiology just goes back, then it's like it takes back that reign and that realization of everything you just said 100%, but it anchors it in, I think, in our day and age, because we don't have the language and we don't spend time in these other levels, especially the emotional body, in the physical body and seeing that quick shift.
Yes. And I was going to say, it's funny because as you said that the higher self, my brain instantly went functional adult.
Yes.
Right. That is that part of you that will always care for you.
Yeah.
That will be that part of you that always sees you as valuable.
And I think it's the part of you that has all of you.
Yes.
That we forget, like, and you described this so well before of like the experiences. Like you could have had this experience and it diminished, and what you held or the way that it hit you or how it triggered you. And then maybe that experience, as a spiral of learning happens, it keeps repeating because there's a lesson that's not learned and you're not bringing in and integrating all aspects of you from that, as you call the functional adult, that like knows all of you.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too when it comes to, in my lens of, this is why I love the body and I want to help people connect with it, because it is the coolest, in my mind, vessel of all aspects of you. And it's not only is it keeping you in survival and it's keeping you thriving and it's creating all these altered pathways when all these things are, the communication is off, right? The signaling is off because of a trauma that's being held and an emotion that is stuck in a muscle. And it's given, but it is concurrent with keeping you going and thriving and adapting to all these crazy toxins and all these things that are coming in.
Yeah.
It still is always taking a minute to tell you, sometimes 15 different ways, the same feedback of this is what we need. And this is, and that's that connection on like all the levels.
Well, and I think too, like, so it's funny because I feel like as soon as I said maladaptive, I kind of wanted to go and self-edit too. That strategy or whatever allowed you to survive in a moment that was as productive as you could come up with the skill set that you had. And so that pattern will continue on. And it's so scary and it's such a vulnerable experience to try something new that could leave you in a more dangerous or feel, even if it's not like a real threat that's happening in front of you, like having that just physiological response to even a perceived threat. It could be emotional.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're kind of giving me a nice segue into this other piece that came up that I found super valuable. And so as in this group of women, amazing, brilliant women, were exploring different aspects of themselves through the different chakras and different healing modalities that were available to them. What was really fascinating is that in some of the cases, things that they had an aversion to.
Yeah.
Because there's a 7-course tasting to integrate it through food and sound and music and color was all integrated. So it was kind of having this whole sensory tune in as you're going through and building the energy of the chakras as you go from root all the way up to crown. So in this, the women that had the like aversion to a certain course, for example, or like even the color, like it wasn't, they're like, that one was not my thing. In that negative experience, because we also did this bioacoustics, which is looking at the voice imprint, which serves as a hologram of what's going on in the body. And we just did it from the lens of the chakras and the keys, because your voice has all frequencies in it, and it matches those energy centers. So we can see if one is extenuated, one is too low. So in that, what was fascinating is when they had that moment of like, I didn't really like that one, but it maybe opened up as they started going up and they had a better experience beyond it. That one was one that needed balancing.
Yeah.
And so it brought up in the dialogue and the conversation, and our conversation after is this idea of we have to numb, silence, and run from discomfort.
Yes. You know what you're making me think of? It's like going to the gym and you're like, I want to lose 10 pounds. And you're, maybe you've got an instructor that's going to help you along the way. Like, great. And they give you this whole routine. You're like, yeah, but I'm not going to do it. Because that's just too much work. That's what we do. It's so uncomfortable, and I totally get it. I like raise a hand, right? Like who's showing up out there going like, yeah, I love being in discomfort. It's like my favorite thing.
Right.
But here's the other thing too. When I find for myself that I've recognized, whether it's like the pit of the stomach feeling or the butterflies, whatever that discomfort is, and I don't speak it, oh, I feel awful.
Yeah.
And so I know that I'm in best service to myself when I am uncomfortable. And sometimes I'll even talk to people when they struggle with using their voice, especially in times of conflict, for instance, or where they perceive it's going to be conflict. And I ask how it would feel if it felt like collaboration instead. And I think not only that, like collaboration with the other person, but it's collaboration with yourself and recognizing, can you help me solve this?
Yeah.
Because it's not a you issue. You keep doing the thing that I don't like. It's a me thing.
Yes.
I don't like it. And again, walking back to boundaries, actually. And we can't figure that out if you don't know what you need and want.
Yes.
So welcome to Codependence Meeting Boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that too, that center point and that foundation, when it comes to the tuning in aspect and setting those firm boundaries, right? And that also it's understanding so that you don't end up in some cases like getting to that anti-dependence.
Yes. Well, and I want to, because you used the word firm, and I want to, it's funny, there's this space in me that I noticed a reaction to that. Boundaries are meant to keep us connected and protected.
Yes.
Not only with the other person, but with ourselves.
Yeah.
So if we go back to that, I'm going to build trust and vulnerability with myself first.
That was the piece I was missing. Yeah.
I'm going to make it with you.
Yeah.
And I can be kind and I can be gentle and I can be compassionate with it. And I think that's something Brene Brown has shown in her work too, that the most compassionate people tend to be the most boundaried people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, and what's that's getting back to that keeps resonating for me is that whole piece of, because we become so outward focused and then we're in this world of like doing. Like we're constantly doing like all the things.
Yes.
That because of that, we lack also the stillness.
Oh.
And
Preach. Okay.
Right.
Go ahead.
But in the lack of that and the focus on self first and going back to your point of understanding needs and wants, we are also removing that understanding that the most essential thing is relationship with self first.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. So instantly popped up in my head, Dan Siegel's Wheel of Awareness. If you're not familiar with it, go take a peek, go online.
Yeah.
I know he has a lot of stuff that you can download for free, and he actually has a mindfulness practice. I think one is, the shortest one is like 7 minutes or something like that. But yes, sitting in that stillness, drawing your attention back to yourself. And it's not to be done in this selfish way. It's to be done in actually a very, I think, loving and compassionate way that's gentle with the self, so that it lets you be loving and compassionate with others.
Yeah, and you can't, and it is that piece of, you can't bring that to a relationship if you don't understand it and have it first.
Right?
Yeah, and that and what I love about this concept of tuning in, but then also doing it in a group, is that it's building on that understanding of the interplay between the people and that exploration. And when you start with the center point, and then all of a sudden you're looking and you're like, oh, and it changes the context of not like, and you kind of mentioned this before, of like, they keep doing that, like, I don't like that vibe or whatever, right? I don't like them. I don't like what they're doing. But then you're like, why? Why is this rubbing up against me this way? And when in that little bit of turning and tuning,
be curious.
Because what will happen is when you actually have that insight and you can balance that. Yeah. Suddenly you're going to be shocked because they don't really bother you anymore. Well, or it's the other sin, it's that discomfort, and they're drawing you to something about self that hasn't been integrated. And then when you connect with them, like, actually, I really like them. Because they were like this missing piece that felt resistance.
Sure.
And and in that discomfort, this has come up in my practice quite a bit, is sometimes when that resistance come up, I'm like, oh no, like this is the good stuff. Like it always like, this is the good stuff because this is actually where you need to move towards.
Yeah.
And I know it's going to feel like, oh no, I don't.
Yeah. I sometimes will use imagery with clients and I'd say, imagine if that part of you walked through the door right now, would you ask them to just leave and get out?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, they're going to be pounding on your door.
Right.
Oh, they're going to be loud. Not only that, they're going to enter in whether you want them to or not.
Yeah. And in the physical plane, this will come up, and I think we had talked about this, is, things start as a whisper. Like, hey, buddy, just letting you know. And then it will move to like, okay, I'm going to have a conversation because you're not really listening to me. And it reminds me of like that 4-year-old, like, hey, I am going to start talking a little bit louder, a little faster. I'm raising my voice. And then it will go to like where it's full on tantrum. Yeah. And the problem is we also have gotten so segmented, like dissected. We dissected ourselves. Like we cut off the head is separate. And then we have this body, which when we see the body, all we think of is physical, meaning like the only tool for the physical primarily, right, is in my role is like movement. And you're like, nope, you got a lot more tools than that. And so like the physical body of like, oh, like I need to go to the gym. Like I need to go to the gym. That's going to solve all my problems. And like this back pain that I have and then, or we're working on the back pain and we're shocked when we keep seeing these really highly skilled practitioners, but it will get a little better and then it rebounds. Yeah. That's not them. Yeah. It's us. Like, why does this keep coming up? Because there's that integration. Yeah. And we saw with the chakra balancing of like the chiropractor pointing to the same point, and then also the color of the food and the one that they had some aversion to, literally being aligned to the one that they needed the most. Yeah. And so and what's cool about it, some of them had this aha moment of like, oh, so my body is telling me like, and then also emotional or thought patterns. Yeah. There's a couple that were like, that thought struck me. Like when you did the balancing thought, like I realized that one kind of like, it was like hard for me to take those words in and to say them myself. And so all of those levels of self are providing feedback. So it's like when a person is sitting over there saying those words that are triggering you, there's some part of you that's calling for attention. Yes. And that's absolutely. The key. It's like all of these different things that come up.
And do you know where I find the most stuckness with clients is where it's possible that their functional adult just hasn't been fully developed yet. And so it's a fear that if I do let that part of me in, if I do witness it, I won't be able to take care of it.
Describe that more.
So it might be a client who identifies, they've got an inner child wound and they can identify the age of the child, but they're like, oh my gosh, I want to push them away. I don't want to, they're mean to me. And when I hear that, I'm like, okay, well then that's not a functional adult responding in that moment. You've got some other part of you that's responding. So it's really building that awareness of self that yes, you are valuable. This is what boundaries look like. This is what our codependence and interdependence looks like. This is what imperfection and sitting in humanity looks like. This is what being spontaneous and open looks like. And those are just the 5 core values of PIT. When we can build all of that, we can sit in that space and actually be so loving and kind to that part of us. And so it makes me think of another podcast that I listened to because I love listening to my podcast and on the walks. It was a Tim Ferriss podcast and he had Jack Kornfield on it, and he was talking about the Buddha and seeing, I believe it was Mara at the gate or anxiety at the gate and the sentries guarding the gate. And finally the Buddha comes down and says, Mara, I see you. And that's the same perspective that we want to have with whatever. It could be some chakra point. It could be an emotional content. If you want to go through an IFS label, it could be your exile, your manager, your firefighter, or whatever. It doesn't matter the label you give it. It can be the child at age 4. Yep. Whatever part of you is showing up, please witness it.
That's it. And that is, I think, for people to kind of get back into that space and that understanding that all of this is calling for attention. Yeah. And when we're in this practice of bypassing, I'm going to numb, I'm going to silence.
Okay, that is exactly what happens when we don't address areas of codependence. Yes. Yes, we get into excess. Yes.
So in that too, we realize that when you're in codependence, you're outsourcing. Someone else is going to solve for you,
or something else,
or something. Thank you. Yeah. So something outside of self is the solution for self.
Is the salve. But think about that. But the part of it was that somebody along the way didn't teach you, didn't slow down with you, and let you know that you were enough to be cared for in a way that they could see you and openly just accept everything about you.
And I think in that, it led to the knowledge because of the lack, and then seeking it. Yeah. It led to the lack of knowledge of, wait, I'm the one. I'm the one that needs to see me. Yeah. I'm the one that needs to see the worth and the value, because I think in that lack, it created seeking. Yeah. Oh, then someone else is going to fill that role. Oh, and then someone else.
Well, and think about the intergenerational trauma that happens as a result of that. And I think you talk about it going back into like cellular structure, and Dan Siegel talks about that too, as far as intergenerational trauma and just how we pattern over time that lack of awareness to the self, or the lack of need, or whatever it might be. And so I don't use this I'm not wanting to use this as a platform to say your parents were shit. I mean, we're going to show up in our humanity with the best skills that we have, but there's going to be this perpetuation of lack of awareness that happened. But just because maybe you're grown up in your life isn't going to grow up in a way that you need it doesn't mean that you can't grow yourself up.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And I think too, when it comes to that pattern and the lack of, or like that seeking outside of yourself, and then coming to that point where I'm taking up the reins, and that brings it kind of full circle too of, when I take up the reins and when I start doing some of the work too, and all it starts with is tuning in.
Oh my God. And I think, yes. Because I think one of the other challenges too is they're thinking like, I use this as a visual. People walk into a house and they love your kitchen, right? Let's say that you've had a massive remodel and they, oh my God, this is so gorgeous. I would love this. What they haven't seen is all the little work that's gotten to get you to that point. Right. And so I think about that. We all look at the final product and think that is so massive. I can't take that on. Right. And so you're talking about this tuning in, and that's where you start.
That's a start. And it's literally like, it is what and bringing it back to the ancients, it's because we lost that knowledge too, that this actually was what people did every day. And they did it in the community, and they understood. In fact, there was this example of the ancient Chinese and how they would tune to one single note for hours.
Oh my gosh.
And so it seems and even when you look at the history of like how they would do music and how they used it for the harmonics, and they used it to balance not only the physical but the emotional and then the thought, the mental plane. And it was restorative. And they understood the angles, and the math is phenomenal, way beyond what we understand, especially in terms of the healing modalities of really, this is like in the body, because it gets to what's behind it all, which is frequency, right? We are light.
Just energy.
Yeah, we are just energy. And the energy, and the other thing too is not only are we just energy and it drives everything, but also there's so much around us that our body is perceiving, and we only perceive a fraction. So when you layer these two pieces together, that we're constantly being bombarded, and then we have our higher self, which is, and you call it the functional adult, that's trying to drop in and give more tool, like more information, because it's all information. When we talk energy, what we're talking about is information. And then when we merge it with like the wisdom, which is the experience, and integrating it into our being, that is taking it to, that takes it where then we can actually mold it and shape it and work with it. So going back to the ancient Chinese.
And then think about all the noise that's kind of cluttered our systems, right? And then think about how accessible, not only just accessible we are to one another right now. I mean, I'm wearing a smartwatch, we've got our cell phones, or supercomputers in our pockets at all times. And we are connected not to the tribe, which we would normally have just had as information base, but we are connected to everything. And the brain was not meant to process everything.
No, it's overload. And again, and then what it leads to is scattered and lack of discern. Like you can't discern when it's so much, but if you're not coming from a grounded point.
Yeah.
And also just
But how can we get grounded if we don't have that space of silence?
Yeah, 100%.
Yes.
And again, like look at it.
Yes.
When do you have silence?
Right.
Like everybody,
So you
like,
gotta schedule that sucker in.
because we can't. Our culture.
Yeah.
As a group, because even like, tell me when you actually create silence. And some people say, and there's a lot of people that practice meditation, and then we'll get into silence, but in some ways too, it's the actual silence, because meditation is also very active.
Oh,
it's you're doing thought images, and sometimes and you're holding extra space, and so it is an energetic. When we talk silence, it is the null.
Yeah. Well, and I even think too, for some people, they're like, I'm gonna punch a mother if like if you tell me to sit there quietly and just hold my fingers together and go
Yes.
I'm like, you know what? There can be mindfulness and meditation and movement. So maybe you're a
100%.
gardener, maybe you're a walker, maybe you can find another modality that works for your body. Again, that's tuning in.
Yes. Well, and really that silence in the null is, and it can be for some people. I think it's driving in the car.
Oh my gosh!
Without
Absolutely.
noise, the hum of the car, and then suddenly, and because the other thing too that I love about for some people when it comes up in the car, it's when you think about it, you're kind of in autopilot because we're so experienced in it. Especially if we're going point A to point B that we go every single day, and it leaves that space for you to actually get out of the thinking, doing brain, because it's like auto. So then it can rise up to other executive centers where like processing happens, and you leave the quiet and the still as you're doing, but still for things to start coming up. And the coming up is what we kind of are. It's hard, I think, for a lot of people, because as things come up, they're like, oh, we're going to put this back down. I'm going to turn up the radio. I'm going to call my friend.
And pay attention to that. Okay, so pay attention to that, because I think, and I certainly had that experience before, where suddenly you're driving across a bridge and like, how the fuck did I just cross this bridge? Like, that's our brain disassociating.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean,
but that's also, I say, but that's feedback, to saying like, oh, I think I need a break.
I need a break.
I need a break. I need to be a little bit quiet here.
Yes.
And again, it's just, it's constant noticing. And I think I also get that as feedback too from clients, like, am I ever going to stop thinking about what I'm thinking about? Like, well, as long as this canoodle is still going.
And that gets into understanding, and this is like the eye behind the eye, that you are not your thoughts, because the thought, and that gets into, and just that connection.
Don't judge the first thought, folks.
Well, and the connection of awareness, that the thoughts that arise in us sometimes can be like patterns, and it can be from the outside environment, things that we're picking up, things that we picked up since we were young.
Yes.
But the other thing too is that we forget, because we are also very disconnected with this foundational understanding of cell and how profound it actually is in driving everything. But the cell itself holds memory, and it holds memory because, again, all of the ancestors that went for you and all those genes that came through, it holds that memory. So things that can come up, because everything is frequency and thoughts are frequency in the body at a higher octave, they end up, but same in that chakra plane, some of those that are coming up for us are not ours at all.
Yeah.
They are transgenerational.
Okay. Hi. Hello. Yep. Okay. So we're talking intergenerational. We're talking carried emotions even.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, yes.
Right. They're not my feelings. They're actually yours. And those feel and resonate actually very differently in the body.
Talk about that carried emotion to give people that might not be aware of like the context of a scenario when they would do that.
Okay.
Like maybe in a marriage.
Oh, okay. I instantly went to like a parent-child relationship.
You could do that one too.
Yeah. No. Okay, so I'm thinking of, let's say we've got a parent who is highly anxious, and it could have been just organically, they have more anxiety that lives in their body, or it could be, again, their own carried emotion that they've been carrying intergenerationally. Let's say they're on the playground with a kiddo, and the kiddo's just climbing the monkey bars, right? And the parent is constantly, oh, Bobby, what? Oh, no, are you holding on? And they're constantly on this edge. And the kid is going to learn in that process that this is not safe.
Yeah.
And so maybe when they're going out and all of a sudden they're in their adult and they're like, gosh, I just feel really anxious when I try new things, or things that kind of are just on the edge. It could have been because, well, mom was standing under you, Bobby, that whole time fretting about the fact that you might or might not fall, and nothing's happening, but she's reacting before something's ever happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's noticing, is that my emotional content coming up or is that somebody else's?
Somebody else's,
And I'll even like I'll raise a hand, like, because I'll do it for myself. I'll notice too, like if I'm reacting in a situation that doesn't feel like it fits me and I notice it doesn't fit me and I go, shoot, who is this? Who is this? And in a moment, and I'm not calling out my husband, but like I'm like, I recognize, oh, he's activated in a moment. And so I'm responding in a way that's activated, even though that doesn't fit with how I really felt about it initially.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to having that foundation and understanding self again and tuning again. And it's a skill. It is literally what we're designed. Like it's our birthright to be in this vessel. We also need to be in this vessel.
Yeah.
And we need to understand the us behind the vessel that's actually literally driving. We forget that.
Yes.
And so that then we can have that discernment of, okay, hang on a second. I am really reactive right now.
Yeah, why?
Just, is this mine?
Curiosity, yes.
And I love that word. Like the whole thing. And to me, I was talking about like when setting up this podcast, like this mental playground, because I'm like ultimately like going back to that child self of life becomes fun again when it's not like, and we use the word of like doing the work. I've been doing the work. It's like, let's get rid of that. Like we're playing, it's exploring and it's expanding. And like, and again, like then when I'm taking that back, I'm like in the playground, I see that swing over there. And that swing for me may be, you know, some of the like new therapy.
Yeah.
I'm going to go get on that swing and see how this feels. And like, and if I'm going to use this in my toolkit and then I'm going to try this on and oh, am I going to use it? And like for me in the nutrition side, like when there is nothing better than exploring and like building things in and like, oh, like when can I take this in?
Yeah.
And not just because I was told like I should eat kale. Like, can you process that kale? And your body might be giving you some feedback that it can't.
No, thank you.
And you're like, but I was told I could.
Yeah.
Your body's saying.
The whole, like, like, isn't this a superfood and everybody's doing it?
Everybody's doing it. I got to do it too. And it's like, cool. Because every time you do, your body's like, cool, I got to take and I'm going to create this side product and you're going to get bloated.
Yeah.
And then you get bloated. Yeah. And then it's like, but I'm supposed to.
And then you probably beat yourself up for it because you're like, I'm supposed to be enjoying this and yet I feel like crap.
Yeah. And I feel like crap and I don't want to eat this food. Yeah. And then now like food has become frustrating for me instead of being like, hey, what if that's a feedback of something you need to come down and avoid for a little bit. Yeah. And then you get back into like balance and then it becomes abundant. But also the thing is what you need.
Yeah. Stop shooting on yourself.
Yes.
That's the therapeutic joke. Stop shooting on yourself.
Yes.
Okay.
And the other thing, and this gets back into like my sweet spot because I do bio-individual nutrition, is what you need.
Yeah.
And it's not just nutrition. It's all levels.
Yep.
All levels of nourishment is not what anybody else needs.
Yeah.
Because the combination that makes you on all of those levels and all of the signaling and all of the knowledge, it is unique. Yeah. And so it's like, but no one can find that for you.
No, it's so it is. This is the last part of PIT, the last one. This is the spontaneous and open, and is going out and doing that exploration. We can't do it by being overly contained, and we can't do it by being limited or limitless. Yes. Yeah, we can't find connection and intimacy on either end of that spectrum.
Yeah,
and it's not just with our others; it's with ourselves.
Yeah,
yeah,
beautiful. And I love you kind of bringing it to this closure of PIT again, because I want you to leave last thoughts for the audience as we're wrapping up. And I think the main takeaways in our discussion today is really that sweet spot that we talked about in that that interdependence of being able to ask for help, but also sometimes doing it on your own.
Yeah, get into that scary zone, right?
All of it comes back to you are like it's unbelievable how powerful you are.
Yeah.
Step into your power and who you are to show up in the world starts with you spending time with you.
I think that's
this relationship first.
That's it. This relationship first.
So maybe connecting back to that PIT, do you have any last thoughts for the audience?
You know, if anybody feels like from a therapeutic perspective, as far as just a mental health perspective, that they want to explore this further, find maybe a PIT trained therapist in your area. That can help you kind of walk through some of the things that I talked about and give a little more in-depth analysis, or look for yourself. Not what everybody else is doing, but like for yourself, what it makes sense for you.
I love it. And on that note too, will that come up when they're searching? Can they search for by
Oh,
PIT?
absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Post-induction therapy.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, it's so wonderful to have you, and I look forward to next time.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening. If you're ready for a journey of self-discovery through unlearning everything you thought you knew about diets, nutrition, and how it informs your health, and relearning from the perspective of your body's brilliance, then I invite you to join me next time as we continue to challenge the way you see food. Want to connect? Email us at info@theaso.com, THEACESO.com. And be sure to visit us at www.theaso.com, THEACESO, where you can find all of our latest podcasts, blogs, masterclasses, and services to bring your health journey via nutrition to the next level and based on your biologically designed perfect fit.